And welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend Lino. And Heat fans, we have a jam packed episode today full of good times and bad times because we were away for almost the entire 7 game winning streak and almost the entire losing streak as well. So we're excited to catch up with a lot of good things. I want to start this show off on a serious note and just make sure everyone is keeping in mind it goes Wilt, Bam, Kobe. And that's just going to be the overarching theme of the entire episode is nothing else will matter more than that 83-point game. But in all seriousness, we'll start with a little news and notes. The most noteworthy thing that's happened that we haven't covered yet is the Miami Heat, the league front office, and the Charlotte Hornets have resolved the Terry Rozier trade investigation fiasco, as far as we can tell. And Charlotte agreed to send a 2026 second round pick to Miami. It is the Golden State Warriors second round pick. So it looks like it's going to be about the 11th pick in the second round, 41st overall, which is cool because I don't believe the Heat had a second round pick. So now they do. Lino, as far as a resolution for this saga, how did this news land with you?
That works just fine for me. I was totally satisfied with getting nothing or just accepting of that fate. And so to get a second round pick, like an actual pick and not a compensatory one, feels like an upgrade from what we could have expected. But I also think that means that they were more fearsome of what would happen otherwise. Like if this went to court or if this went to arbitration in some capacity, it was something that nobody wanted to deal with. So they had to give up an actual pick. It's a bit damning in that way, in that the league and the Hornets probably knew more than nothing about what was going on with Rozier. And so it is definitely something that I'm glad we got. I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference for us moving forward, especially given that we gave up a first round pick, but at least it's something, and hopefully we can move on.
Yeah, that was my general sentiment as well. I had expected to get absolutely nothing out of this. So at least to get a second is cool. The Heat's last second round pick was Pelle Larsson, who you could argue is like the second most important player on the team right now. So that's exciting. I always think of Heat second round picks as like they just get a runway to the first guy they would have picked up that went undrafted. They essentially just get to skip to the front of the line. So we'll see who they take with that selection. And also, just if anyone missed it, this is again resolving an issue where the Heat traded a first round pick in Kyle Lowry for Terry Rozier. At that time, an investigation was already underway of him having some unsavory communications about gambling lines related to him. And the league and the Charlotte Hornets knew about that and did not inform the Heat. And so that's why this compensatory pick is coming through. I guess that's kind of the interesting part if you want to think of it as a precedent, is this does kind of establish some wrongdoing in a way, which, I mean, it's been over a year and a half, I think, since that trade happened. So you can only, go back so far to rectify it. But it is interesting that at least in some capacity, this kind of means someone, I doubt the league, probably the Charlotte Hornets, are admitting, okay, yeah, we probably should have let you know about that. So all is well that ends well. Terry is still on the team, by the way. There's a report from Anthony Chang, I believe, of the Miami Herald, saying that the Heat are expected to waive Rozier sometime soon. The deadline has already passed for signing a free agent that would be able to participate in the playoffs for the Heat. So what I'm assuming, and this is totally just speculation on my part, is in the past, the Heat have done this thing where they'll sign a guy at like the very end of the season. Basically, they don't have to pay him anything this year, but they can sign him for a multi-year contract going forward. I think they did that with guys like Rodney Magruder, Duncan Robinson. So I'm assuming that's what they'll do with that roster spot. They'll waive Terry and then sign maybe one of the two-way guys or just somebody straight out of the G League. So that's one transaction to watch out for. But that kind of covers our off-the-court things that are going on. Now we'll transition to what's been happening on the court. In the Heat are just hilarious, man, because there's just a magnetic pull for them to a 500 record. They can get 8 games above 500 and then they'll lose 5 games straight and lose it all back. And yes, they will probably ultimately finish slightly above 500, but the point remains, as good as this team can look, they can look that bad. just as quickly. So, Lino, thoughts about on the court, how things have looked lately? I know we just had a great win. If for anybody listening, that we were recording this after the Philadelphia game and before the Boston game. So a great win last night, really needed. They had been losing a lot. But what's your general vibe on the team right now?
I think as I went back and rewatched a lot of the games over the past week, the growing sentiment I had from game to game is just that this team doesn't necessarily look like it's functioning at its fullest potential. Everybody just kind of lacks some kind of oomph that the team really carried forward. There's been flashes of brilliance. There's been historic games that have happened over the past couple of weeks that we've talked about. There's been a few guys that are really getting after it on every possession, but as a team and as a unit, it's just been a bit lackluster, win or loss, with exception to the other night against Philly. Everybody just doesn't seem to really be giving that heat culture 110% on the court, with exception to like one or two players. And so that's been kind of frustrating to watch. And I think it's a big reason why we've lost and dropped some games to some pretty bad teams over the past week. That loss to the Pacers was especially embarrassing, but probably the starkest example of if the other team just has one or two guys that want it more than we do, we've kind of fallen apart over the past weeks. Whereas earlier in the season, whenever we were facing bad teams, and blowing them out by 30, 40 points, that's because we still gave an immense amount of effort to win those games. And that's why we were blowing teams out by double digit point spreads because we didn't take those games off, and so it worked to our benefit. Whereas at this point in time in the season, I think guys are really struggling to find things to fight for, especially as we drop more games, especially as the wind's been taken out of our sails a little bit with the losing streaks that have kind of dropped us out of making out of the play-in without a really perfect run here towards the end. And that's really shown on the court from even guys who I think typically give a lot of effort. Bam has been amazing throughout this whole season, but even he has had some very strange games over the past week or so. Khalil Ware still runs into the same issues of effort, and if he's going to be a real functional and impactful basketball player, it's going to have to somehow be over the course of actual 82 games. And then guys like Pelle Larson and Jaime Jaquez, who showed up really aggressively, just have to function in that way without still being very great shooters. And so it really limits the kind of impact they can have despite the great effort. So overall, it just seems like an effort issue. It seems like our offense has been kind of stale. The movement has not really been there. That really makes this Noah LaRoche system work best is when everybody's moving, and there's a lot of standing around that happens. There's, again, flashes of brilliance. Tyler's scoring has been really impressive lately, but even he, I think, would say that the effort for everybody could have matched more what we saw against Philly, and we'd probably be in a very different scenario right now. But what's been the growing sentiment for you?
Yeah, I think I saw it a little differently, in the sense that I think our defense is what most people would point to as being the really big issue recently. I mean,
Oh
there's
yeah,
been all kind of stats about this is the most points the Heat have given up over this many games, all these different things, and it's easy to be reactionary to that. And I did that myself. Not saying you were, but my initial reaction was like, what happened? Why is this? Because you watched the games and it was like before this losing streak, the Heat were like the fourth best defense in the league. Now I watch the vast majority of the NBA games I watch are Heat games, but they didn't feel like a top four defense to me. And now after this losing streak, they're like the eighth best defense, and that honestly feels a little more accurate. I think there's a lot of defensive talent on this team and a lot of guys that try hard, but Bam's probably the only one will actually get named to an all defense team. And even he, as amazing as he is, has rim protection limitations and stuff that allows you to really impact the entire court, even though Bam, is still very impactful. But Cooper Moorhead had this tweet, and this is before the Philly game, but this was since March, or the breaking point was March 1st, essentially. So this was Heat defensive 3-point percentage allowed, Up until March, it was 34.8%, which that's like a top 5 number. Now you can say the Heat's multiple efforts and, longer defenders flying around that has limited some opponents to shoot worse from 3, but there's also just only a certain amount of 3-point percentage you can really control. So again, up until March, about 35%. Since March, it's jumped up to 39%. And that definitely it has felt that way. Like they're like especially that Cavs game, the Spurs game, it was like dude, it just felt like they hit every three for stretches of those games. But what Cooper Moorhead pointed out, which I thought was interesting, is he has access to like shot quality data. And if you take the same break point, so until March, opponents' 3-point shot quality was a 53. Now, I don't know where, I mean, I'm assuming it's like, actually, I have no idea what the spectrum is, but essentially it was 53. So that's your reference point. Since March, it has dropped to 52.7. So 53 to 52.7. So almost identical, but the teams are making a lot more of these shots. And you felt that in the indie game. These were guys like, Micah Potter hit,
Mhm.
I mean, TJ McConnell, like not guys that are prolific 3-point shooters are just knocking down shot after shot. So while the defense has been frustrating, and I agree with you, the efforts have waned. I almost wonder how much of that is like a feedback loop or almost like a circular logic where this guy makes, whoever it is, Pella, Jaime, 3 efforts on a play, and the dude just knocks down a 3 in his face. The next time down, is he like, well, I don't know if I'm going to try that hard again because I just, tried so hard and still got scored on. I wonder how
Yeah.
much of it is almost psychological because these opposing teams have been really hot shooting lately, and that's just a lot to deal with defensively.
It's true, and I think that Pacers game is such a perfect, like, thought exercise to try to understand what's been happening over the course of this past month, because I would say that that was kind of my biggest example is guys like TJ McConnell and Micah Potters single-handedly carried that Pacers team and kept them in it for 3 quarters. Other guys started to get into it there, but there was nobody out hustling either of those guys through that entire first half. Like we were doing fine offensively, but defensively, like we have to one have some self respect and just not let a guy like Micah. Like if Micah Potters makes two or three threes, that should just be it for him. Like we have to make some adjustments. I don't think Bam even started to attack him offensively until much later in the game and like making adjustments and reacting to things in ways, you never want your defense to be too reactive, but we oftentimes as a franchise let guys just kill us for full games and just live with it. And it always is very embarrassing. Max Struess is a guy, the Cavaliers, we had a good win against them, but that game where Max Struess makes 4 threes is completely unacceptable. And that's 4 threes in like the first half, maybe even a quarter. That's just completely unacceptable. That's on the scouting report. That's from the time that he played with us as a member of the Miami Heat. Like we cannot let Max Strus just go out there and shoot threes all day. Like that's something that needs to be neutralized. But I really didn't see the effort to really, hamper him from getting the ball at all. And there's other things going on. There's other priorities, but at the same time, we just kind of don't really attack people the same way as we have in the past. And I think that explains why the defense, I think that's part of at least why the defense doesn't look like it used to. And while I also agree with you that this team never really looked like the fourth best defense in the league to me, especially given, the guards that we've started, and we'll talk about Tyler and Norm starting together in a separate segment, but it just it did not have any of the signature stuff that has allowed this team to succeed when we do succeed, and it will have to be fixed if we're going to have any hopes moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think we'll keep referencing it, but the comparison of the Indy game to the Philly game is just so exemplary of this. I think the zone, especially, like if you're in high school, or maybe even if you're the type of person that plays zone at pickup, you kind of know, okay, that's like I can rest a little bit. I might not have to move around that much. But in the NBA, as you would guess, and especially the way the Heat play zone, you have to move more because there
Mhm.
are just small little gaps you have to cover. And you can see that especially like in the Philly game, they're trying to get it to Embiid in the middle. So Pella Larson is cheating in from the wing to get it to the middle, but then Oubre lifts to where Pella just was. So then Pella has to sprint back out there. So then Jaime has to drop to Embiid. And I mean, these guys are just having to move around like crazy. And to your point, against Indy, Micah Potter's in the corner. He's a role player. Like he was out of the league last year. I'll kind of close out. But then, like you said, he hits a few, and especially because there's so little surrounding talent, you have to then adjust to that. You have to
Mhm.
make multiple efforts. And as we know, the Heat's defense will always be their strength. It's what feeds their offense. There's all kind of fun stats about, Heat are second in the league in points per game, but it's not hard to figure out they're 14th in offensive rating. They play a lot of possession, so their numbers are inflated. They're a middle of the pack offense, and when they're not able to get in transition, it can look really bad, especially if the threes aren't falling. So they're a team that is reliant on their defense, and everything kind of come crumbling down if they're not getting what they need to out of that side of the ball. But again, like with the Philly game, we saw they were able to, and it led to a lot of amazing transition play without creating a lot of turnovers. Cooper Moorhead pointed that out as well. I think the Heat only forced 6 turnovers and they had like 30 fast break points. Because, I mean, the Sixers crashed a little more than I would have expected, and the Heat were just
Mhm.
taken off. Those Tyler threes late, they were just sprinting out, finding him in transition. I mean, those are the best looks our offense is going to get. So
Yeah.
hopefully they can find more of a rhythm in that way to close out the season with these 6 remaining games. But with that being said, there are 6 games left. The Heat, I believe, are currently ninth. If you look at different projections, they might finish seventh, they might finish eighth. It's a very small percent chance they could actually get out of the play in. But Lino, from kind of a bird's eye view, I guess, what does it say about this team that they're in this play-in situation again? And as a fan, an observer, what are you kind of rooting for? What's your vibe of where this team may finish in the standings?
If I had to guess and if I had to put money on the line, I would say that this team is absolutely going to be in the play-in tournament, and I try to not let that make me feel too bad. The Miami Heat have been in the play-in tournament far too much, but there are caveats and there are nuances to how this has happened. We are probably unfairly pressuring a team that was not markedly improved to try to make it out of the play-in tournament. And this is almost the same team as last year with, a few extra faces who have been impactful at times. But I don't think any of us at the beginning of the season thought we were in contention for a top 6 seed. Now, the fact that we have an opportunity to do that, I think, is good. Like it's a good step forward. It's not enough, but it is a progressive point. Like, going from the 10th seed, and if we finish as the 7th seed, that is progress. So even though it doesn't really feel like it and it doesn't feel good and it's not fun, like it's some of that ugly process that happens in the middle and the ugly progress that you happen in the middle of getting somewhere great. It's just a matter of where do we go from here. I think that it does really matter where we seed ourselves here in the play-in tournament. I think home court advantage is going to be incredibly important because we are a much better team at home than we are away. And the play-in tournament is filled with a ton of talent right now. Like the Hornets obviously had that crazy streak that they were on. The Magic have been unbeatable by us so far this season. So I think it's going to be very crucial that we can get a 7th seed and maybe face off against the Sixers if they fall, or maybe get a chance to face off against the Hornets, who have had our number at times, but I still feel good about our chances of beating the Hornets. If we are the 10th seed and we're playing the Magic away, like that's just it for the season, which isn't the worst thing in the world. We get, top end lottery pick for it, or bottom end lottery pick rather. And that's not terrible to me. So I won't feel too bad if we don't make it out of the play in tournament. But I also am not going to beat myself up and the team up about being in the play-in again. Like it's the same team. Like, and there's 10 spots, and from 11 to 15, they're much, much, much worse teams than us. So it's just, you're not playing in a vacuum where you just get to select wins and losses. Like the season just plays out the way it does. And there's been a huge wall between us and the lottery, but there hasn't been a big wall for us and the playoffs. We had a really great chance to finish this season strong and be pretty comfortably in the, conversation of anywhere from 5 or really just the 5 and the 6 seed. Like, there was a time in which, there was like, okay, if we can make an even extra push right now, we could even have a conversation of, battling with Cavs for the 4th seed. And like, there could be home court advantage on the table. But then we lost like 10 games in a row. That conversation changed fast. So it is what it is. I'm accepting of our fate, but I do think the way these games play out is really going to affect the end of the season for us.
Yeah, it's got to be discouraging. I know it is for me to other Heat fans because this team is certainly significantly better than last year's team, just from a net rating standpoint, from a record standpoint. They already have more wins, and it's very likely they could end up definitely still in the play-in, but maybe still in the 10th seed, depending on how everything plays out. And like you alluded to, when the Heat were on that winning streak, it was so exciting, but simultaneously, Atlanta was on a big winning streak. Orlando was on a big winning streak. So you didn't make up much ground. And now Miami and Orlando have had like coinciding losing streaks. So they're just, no matter what the Heat do, they kind of just seem stuck in that play in. And as frustrating as that is conceptually, like, oh, in the play in again, the point you made is a very good one, that this is a play-in level team. Like, this is a team that's around 500 right now. They're 13th in net rating. Like, that's going to usually be a bottom end playoff team. And I think what's hard for Heat fans, ourselves included, is it's like, okay, we don't want a full out tank, but if you would have traded Norm and Wiggins at the deadline or whatever the hypothetical is, maybe they just get the 13th pick and, just be the 10th seed and lose. It's also worth noting the amount of tanking happening right now is pretty unprecedented. Like, if you look at the Eastern Conference standings, for weeks now, it's been impossible for Miami to fall out of the play-in. Like, the Bucks are 10 games behind Charlotte essentially for that last play-in spot. Like, there's no way to actually get out of the play-in other than through the top, which the Heat have not been able to do. So yeah, it's frustrating. If I'm trying to romanticize it, I do kind of like the concept of Tyler and Bam maybe recognizing this is probably their last run together. And I have liked that the good moments of the last stretch of the season have been driven by those two. And they're two I'm a huge fan of. So I do think that's cool. Zach Lowe always references the Dylan Thomas poem about raging against the dying of the light. And so that's what I like to think of when I'm being positive about Bam and Tyler, is that they both know the writing's probably on the wall, for better or worse, for this specific group. And I think they're trying to make the best out of it that they can. So we'll see if they're actually able to do anything with it. Like we noted, they have 6 games left. 2 of them against Washington, which those are tanking teams, or that's a tanking team, obviously, but it's also the team Bam embarrassed for 83. So I am not chalking those up as wins. I feel like the Wizards are going to play extremely hard against Miami. I would guess there will be like a flagrant against Bam. I don't know if the Wizards have that much fight in them, but they might. They have Boston tomorrow on April 1st. That's going to be a really tough game. And then they have 2 Toronto games and an Atlanta game. And those are the ones, I mean, they'll need to win most of these no matter what. But those are the 3 that if they could win all those, they might be able to push up a little in the standings. It is unfortunate that Toronto and Atlanta have kind of separated themselves in that 5 and 6 range. But if they drop a couple they're not supposed to, and then the Heat are also able to pick up those, there's a slim chance they can move out of the play-in. But like you said, regardless, it would be good to get home court in the play-in because there are some pretty talented teams in the play-in. And look, actually, I think it makes sense to skip ahead here to the play-in matchups, because if the Heat do ultimately end up here, who are they going to be playing, and what does that matchup look like is a very concerning thing. So, Lino, let's narrow it down to Philly, Charlotte, Atlanta, Orlando, Toronto. That pretty much seems like it's going to be those teams plus Miami. Which one of those, you can start with best matchup or scariest? What are your strongest feelings about that group of teams?
The scariest matchup, far and away, has to be the Orlando Magic. That has just been the boogeyman of the season, and that's a team that over the years, like I feel like we've over the past 4 years, we've maybe lost more than we've won. But it's still been relatively competitive, at least within the games and within like the season record. Like I feel like we'll usually tie it up, or it'll only be one game one way or the other way. We've played them 100 times this season, and we can't figure out how to win under any circumstances, no matter who's healthy, who's not. Um, it's just a nightmare scenario would be for us to be playing them away, and the second nightmare is us playing them at home, like getting embarrassed at home by the Orlando Magic, because I'm sure Orlando fans would even travel for that. And just hearing Paolo Banchero chants from our arena would just be really embarrassing. After that, I'm probably next most scared of the Toronto Raptors. I think we've had some struggles against their physicality and their speed and their defense. And so outside of that, I'd love to kill the Sixers' dreams. That's always really fun for me. The Hawks, I don't really remember how our games go with the Hawks, but I also haven't really been able to watch them. So it's not making sense to me that the Raptors and the Hawks are in the fifth and sixth seed and us and the Magic are not. But that's just how the season plays out sometimes. It's that Orlando matchup, that Toronto matchup that is mostly terrifying. The Hornets, I don't know. It kind of really depends on what kind of Hornets team we get in the play-in tournament, because I think they've just been a bit of a flash in the pan, but those are the exact type of teams that can kill you in the play-in tournament for sure. Is there anybody here that you want to face the most?
Yeah, weirdly enough, they're probably the most talented team, but I would still prefer to face Philly. That might be
Mhm.
recency bias with the win last night, but my reasoning is offense is always going to be my biggest concern for this team. And Joel Embiid's presence, while he does a lot of great things for Philadelphia, almost ensures Miami will have a lot of transition opportunities because Embiid, right now, just his physical condition, he's just not able to sprint up and down the court. It was actually interesting. I haven't watched a lot of Philly this year, especially when healthy, but I didn't realize they start Dominic Barlow a lot of the time, and he does a lot of kind of the center dirty work stuff, and they really just allow Embiid to kind of almost function as like a score first power forward.
Mm.
But again, Embiid, we don't have to get into all of his stuff, but he's on the ground a lot. He's flailing around, and that does unlock a lot of transition opportunities for Miami. And I think Miami can guard them pretty well. We saw last night Bam had to play 42 minutes. I assume it'll be similar to that in the play in. Like, I don't think you'd ever allow Embiid to be on the court with just wear. But if Bam's out there, you feel okay about the Embiid matchup. And Philly struggled against the zone a good bit. The Heat are 2-1 against Philly this year with a 3.4 net rating, which is around what they have as a net rating for the season. Key guys have missed time in both of those, or all three of those matchups. But the one last night, both teams were fairly healthy, other than Powell. So that gave you a good look at what that matchup could look like. Next for me, I went Charlotte. Probably feels like a hot take considering since like the new year, they're like number one or two in net rating. But the Heat are 3-1 against them with a 4.9 net so far this season. Uh, you know, the two early games this season, the Hornets weren't the Hornets at that point, right? I think Brandon Miller was still out. So like throw those out. But the last two, they were able to get a nice win in what was maybe Tyler's best game of the season, 33 points. And then they got absolutely steamrolled by the Hornets just a few weeks ago. So it could go either way. The thing with Miami and their offense that scares me the most is teams with a lot of length, which is about to be the three teams I'll mention next. Charlotte doesn't have that as much. They have pressure points. I feel more comfortable that Tyler and Norm and even Bam could really get good matchups out of. So because I trust our offensive players to shake loose a little more, and just that Charlotte's so new, it's a single game elimination between Charles Lee and Eric Spoelstra. I feel confident. Well, maybe confident's the wrong word. I feel more confident we could take care of that one. That leaves the three giant wing teams that are very scary to me. I have Atlanta next just because Miami's at least beaten Atlanta twice this year. They're 2-1 against them. We still have one more game. Plus 10 net rating, which is amazing. One of those games was with Trey Young still playing, so that obviously doesn't even count as what the Hawks are now. But I just don't totally believe their late season surge. So I think maybe the Heat could take care of them. But the amount of length they have on the perimeter is very problematic for the Heat with Nickeil Alexander Walker, Jalen Johnson, and then Yeka Kongwu down low. Then they also have Dyson Daniels, Zachary Risachet. They just have a lot of length on the perimeter that is scary. So you can have length on the perimeter. Then you have Orlando. You covered this one well. 0-5, minus zero point 0.5 net rating. They're big. They're mean. They're probably going to fire their coach, so they'll get a little boost from that. Uh, they're terrible against everyone else, but I don't know. Just the threat of losing to Orlando 6 times in one season without the playoffs is just horrifying. So yeah, I do not want to see Orlando, but I did have Toronto as the scariest matchup. I feel like they have some good top end talent. The Heat have struggled mightily against Toronto this season. They still have 2 more games, but they're 0-2, minus 17 net rating. It's the worst out of all these matchups. The Heat have not broken 97 points in either of those games. This is the second highest scoring team in the league. So we're not
Sick.
able to run. We get just smothered by their length and size. Again, you could go through the roster, but they have a bunch of big dudes that can guard. So that's kind of the order I have it. It would be most fun to probably beat Philly, like you said. And Charlotte, it would definitely lend itself to like the everyone hates the Heat vibe, because if we're the team that keeps them out of the playoffs, like everyone would be really upset. Like if that's the 9-10 or whatever, like if that's let's say we lose 7-8 and then the 8-9 game for the 10th spot or for the 8th spot is Miami and Charlotte, and everybody's like, ooh, Cade's just coming back, like Detroit, Charlotte, that could be an interesting matchup. And then Miami just beats them, probably just to get swept by Detroit.
Just gets
Everyone would be so mad. So unintended comedy, that would be pretty funny, but we'll see how it all plays out. Um, I don't love Miami's chances against either of the top 2 seeds in the East. And again, we've talked about that a little bit. Maybe we should talk about that now. What do you think about this concept of, we've texted about this, they're trying so hard just to get destroyed by these top 2 teams?
Yeah, it's one of those things where at least with the Celtics, like it's going to be bad, but I'll never shy away from us trying to give the Celtics hell from any position in the rankings. It would more than likely be embarrassing, but if we can even make them sweat, like it would be a good time for me. Like if we just made it really hard for them and maybe even got them more exhausted to where they lost in the next round, sick. I'll take it. The Pistons. The unfortunate thing is that I do like that Pistons team, just as like I love the players on that team. I love Asar, Cade. Like I, if we're not going to be involved, like I'd rather them do it. I'd love for them to do it without giving us a gentleman's sweep or a sweep. Like I'd love to not be involved entirely, and if we do face them, I would want us to win without any kind of pain towards that. But it's just hard to get excited again. Like we've done it once before, so there's like a grain in my brain where it's like, okay, you never know. Maybe we're just the team that makes it deep in playoffs from the 8th seed, but I just know that's not a thing and that it probably won't happen again for a long time. So it just feels kind of futile. Now, when we were really pushing for a 6th seed and we'd have to face like the Knicks, facing the Cavs again would not be so fun. But at least they're like a little bit worse of a version of the Cavs, and they got some issues that they're dealing with, and maybe we're a little bit better. But the other night didn't really make me feel that way. Though we did get a impressive win against them, it's just something I'd like to avoid entirely. The playoffs, there's so few scenarios where I'm gonna feel good about what happens there, and so
Yeah,
that is where it's tough.
it's tough because you start asking yourself like almost like meta questions, like, will this be the thing that like forces the front office to make a big change? Like if we get swept again, and it's like, man, I might just rather miss the playoffs. Like
Yeah,
I think changes are coming anyway. And then the other old thing everyone always says is, well, it's good for our young players to get reps in these kind of moments. I don't think that Cavs series made Khalil Ware any better. I
it might
don't
have made him
think
worse.
I don't think losing by 70 and getting bullied on national TV. I mean, maybe. I mean, Khalil and Pella have gotten better. I don't think that series had anything to do with it. Now, I will say, Spo credits that series for tapping in with Noah LaRoche and changing the offense. But I like to believe just missing the playoffs entirely would hopefully have a similar effect.
Yeah, I'm torn on it because I do think, Pella and Khalil going into that experience, like hey guys, probably doesn't get much worse than that. So he just had the worst possible experience you could have in the playoffs, besides something actually heartbreaking with real stakes. So, you're likely to let yourself get embarrassed like that twice in a row, or you're unlikely to let yourself get embarrassed like that two times in a row. So there is probably something to take away from it. Anybody who is trying not to make the same mistake twice will inevitably learn something, but I don't know if it was something that they couldn't have just learned in the off season at home
Yeah,
and practice.
exactly. I will say I like, in like a sick kinda way that the Heat are kinda gonna be locked into, like, the 14th pick or the 15th pick, like, best or worst case scenario, like, maybe the 13th pick, and, of course, you could say to yourself, like, "Well, then you're in the lottery, you could jump up," but, I mean, the Mavs did that last year. Statistically, that happening 2 years in a row is almost impossible, so I'll sleep okay at night. I hope I don't regret saying this. But if the Heat end up with the 15th pick and miss the lottery instead of the 14th pick, that's just not enough motivation for me as a fan to be rooting against the team to lose every night.
Mhm.
It's something I honestly can't do anyway. We talked about this last season, a similar conversation down the stretch where it's like, man, I wish they'd lose out, wish they'd miss the playoffs. And it's like that thing of like analytically, while the game is not on in front of me, I know like to optimize franchise progression, that's the best thing to do. But when I see that flaming ball on the court, that is my family. I'm not
Yeah,
able to root against these people,
it's true.
and so that I'll never be able to do that. So it's nice that the downside of this scenario really isn't that great. I mean, like we said, we already have more wins than last year. There's just not a realistic outcome where the Heat would be able to get like the 10th pick or something. So 14
Yeah.
versus 15, I trust Adam Simon to he's probably going to pick a guy that's projected to go 20th and then he'll end up being good because that's just what
Yeah,
our
we're pretty
scouting.
effective with those draft picks, but you bring up a good point in that, like, and that's kind of what I was getting at is like if we end up in a series against the Celtics, that's my life on the line right there. Like I want nothing more than us to ruin the Celtics season, especially in a year where everybody thought they were going to be terrible and somehow they're the 2 seed. Like it's just they don't deserve that anyways, and I would love to be the one to bring down the basketball gods' fury on them for whatever black magic they conducted.
Ruining the feel good story of the year, Boston Celtics would be right up there with the '06 championship.
Oh yeah.
It would be a really good time. So we'll see. I do remember even that year, I guess it would have been 2024 when Jimmy tore his MCL in the play-in game and
We were
the
right
Heat
there.
ended up playing Boston. First game, the Heat get killed. Everybody's like, "This is a sweep." And then that second game, Hero went crazy, and so
Mhm.
we split at Boston. And there was a 24-hour, whatever it was, 48-hour period where I knew Boston fans are like, "Miami got one on the road. They stole home court. Is it gonna
Just wanna make make them sweat is all I'm saying.
and Jimmy was doing the stuff like, "Maybe I can come back," like, they hadn't officially announced he tore his A MCL, so anything like that, just to stress him out a little bit would be fun. So, we'll see how it all closes out. The last thing we have on the show sheet is just to talk a little bit about lineup configurations right now. Spo has mentioned multiple times, like, it's all hands on deck right now, it's full speed ahead, whatever kind of phrase you wanna use, but it seems like when healthy, Spo wants to go with starting Norm and Tyler together. So that would be the lineup of those two, Davion, Wiggins, and Bam. I guess let's start there. Do you like that lineup, and how much do you think the two shooting guards should be playing together?
I don't love it. It's a bit of redundancy. At the same time, I get it. They're probably our 2 best scorers. It helps with spacing when you have them both out there, but the defensive liability has been kind of a nightmare over the past month, and the redundancy is kind of hard to watch. Like you have two guys who have very similar shot diets. Tyler with a little bit more diverse shot diet, and so that's why I think it's important for him to start and play more minutes. Norm's shot diet has become a little bit harder to stomach as it goes on, and as his effort in general kind of wanes across the board. So that's been a bit of a struggle. And I talk about this a lot. I don't think he's been the same player since he started having some injury problems and some health stuff. Like, I think he was out sick earlier this week, and I just don't know if he's been able to really get right again. since after the All-Star break, but some of the stuff was kind of there to begin with. He is a bit of a shot chucker. He doesn't really do anything meaningful on defense. And he's also just not like a hustle player like the rest of the team is. And so the problem is he kind of drags down the effort level. He's not exactly moving super impactfully in transition on offense or defense. And he isn't really providing much from a board standpoint or even getting the ball moving around. So that has kind of soured my experience with Norm. Do I think there's the best version of Norm that can be super helpful for this team and would look really great next to Tyler? Yes, and maybe we can squeeze that out here at the end of the season, and we will really need to. But overall, it's just become a bit tiresome of like seeing the way he gets to the foul line, and his dependency on that right now is just harder to stomach than it was prior to. So I would really like to see him come off the bench, but I also have a few concerns about him coming off the bench as well. So, but I
Yeah.
want to hear what you think first.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I don't think he should be starting, and I don't think they should play together very much at all. Norm was totally necessary to this team's offense while Tyler was out. Now that Tyler's back, it is a little harder to place where Norm should kind of slot into this team. I mean, I think an off the bench role is good. Like he can be that microwave scorer. But even with that said, like with bench units, I still want the ball in Jaime's hand more, and maybe Jaime could set up Norm for different looks. But yeah, to your point, I mean, Norm has dropped off. There's no other way to say it. If you want to look at like pre All Star, post All Star is kind of a line of demarcation. So pre All Star break, Norm was at almost 62% true shooting and was a plus 2.6. Post All Star break, he's at 58.5% true shooting, which is about average, and he's a minus 4.1. So prior, the team was performing pretty well with him on the court. Since then, they've been pretty poor with him off. And then the same thing applies to any kind of high Tyler plus Norm lineup you want to look at. With just one of them on, the Heat are positive. With both of them off, the Heat are positive by about plus 2.5. It's like not crazy, but in any of those kind of lineups, they're positive. And then with them both on, they're like minus 9. So it's been very bad with both of them on there. Still a small sample size because Tyler's missed a lot of time, obviously. And since Tyler came back, Norm has started missing more time, like you alluded to. But the point remains, yeah, I just don't think it makes sense for them to play on the court together. And I don't want to like pile on Norm too much, but he unfortunately is a player that if he's not being a hyper efficient scorer, he's not able to provide much else. And if he's just an average scorer in terms of efficiency, it can be really debilitating to your offense, but especially to your defense. And I think I like the concept of playing another high level offensive perimeter player with Tyler because teams really do try and throw like a lot of extra coverages at him. But Norm's not really a creator. He's more just a play finisher. Like you alluded to, like picture a Norm Powell late shot clock possession. He's probably trying to get that pickup foul he kind of always goes for. And by pickup, I don't mean pick up basketball, but the gather where he kind of like grabs the guy's arm with his forearm, tries to clamp it, and goes into a shooting motion. For whatever reason, the first half of the season, that was a shooting foul. The second half of the season, that's not a shooting foul. And that is another reason we've seen Norm's efficiency dip. There have been clutch games where that's the shot he's hunting, shot, quote unquote. It's a foul he's hunting. So yeah, don't want to pile on Norm too much, but really wish Spo would stagger those guys and not start Norm. And then also lineup wise, at least last game, he didn't play Kasparis at all. He played Drew Smith and Fontecchio over him. I would definitely like to see Kasparis for the future of the franchise. And I just think he brings a shooting element this team really needs, especially off the bench. If you're going to have Pella and Jaime and, you need some shooting. So a little more Kasparis would be nice too. So do you have any other closing thoughts on the team in general or the rotations lately?
I think the only concern with Norm for me coming off the bench is one, it's just crazy that the guy that got named to the All-Star roster is now arguably unplayable at times. But two, when harkening back to my original point about the effort of this team and like having, and maybe we beggars just can't be choosers when it comes to this kind of stuff and the talent we have. But Norm's effort levels aren't always there, and I fear that he would drag down the bench, whose effort levels are always high because they're anchored by Jaime and Pele. Even with Glowware in there, somehow that unit just gets after it a lot more than our starting unit does at times. So mixing him into that instead of Casper's is kind of nerve wracking, but otherwise, maybe that just gives him the freedom to shoot more and just play off ball in a way that can make things a little bit more simpler for him while playing next to a guy like Jaime who can distribute and manage the floor a little bit better. But we'll see. Like you said, it's still a small sample size. And if he can get more efficient, that would look better. Like all the other deficiencies just don't matter as much if he's actually making threes. It's just a matter of them getting to that efficiency level. And they have 6 games to prove it. So
Yeah, it's true. One other thing I had in my notes I meant to say was you could really feel it in that second Cleveland game, which, the first Cleveland game, they started both of them together and they won. And I never had the thought like, oh, it worked. I was just like, Cleveland was hurt. They had to start Mobley at center. So the second Cleveland game, I immediately was like, this is a perfect example of why this should not be a thing, because we had to start those guys against Cleveland's jumbo lineup. So Bam's on Jared Allen, Wiggins is on Evan Mobley, Davion's on, I think, Harden. So then it's like, okay, Hero or Powell, one of you has to guard Donovan Mitchell on purpose. And Mitchell had a bad game, yes, but still the defense got fried. And the reason you could just see it every possession, it's just so easy for a team to cycle to an advantageous matchup. And it's so advantageous, in fact, it doesn't even have to be a star offensive player attacking one of these guys. Oftentimes it would be Sam Merrill putting the ball in the court, making Bam rotate over, then it was an Evan Mobley dunk, or it was a Max Strus open three. And that was the frustrating part. But then you look at the Philly game and Norm was out. But even if they had just staggered Norm and Tyler, you could see Tyrese Maxey was like, okay, I got Davion, switch. Okay, I got Pella, switch. Okay, I got Wiggins. He's like looking for a matchup to actually be able to exploit. And when there's just one guy out there, in that case, it was Tyler, it's harder to get to that. And then also credits Tyler, just as this random aside, 3 stocks in the Philly game. He was playing hard on defense, and that's all you can really ask him to do at this point. So just shout out to him. That was one of his better defensive performances we've seen.
absolutely, for sure.
Cool. Well, that can kind of wrap it up. This will probably be our last show, I would guess, before the play-in. I'm sure we'll do some kind of play-in preview, and then depending on how things go, we'll do some kind of postseason recap. We'll revisit our predictions from the beginning of the year, see how close we got with different things. But as always, thank you, Heat fans and our families, for tuning in. We always appreciate the support. Please give us any kind of feedback or questions. If you're on YouTube or Spotify, leave us a comment. Let us know kind of what you're thinking, how you're feeling about another year in the play-in. But thank you always for the support. Please like and subscribe. For myself, Micah, my good friend Lino, thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time.